What is up, duelists, and welcome to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. We just got some exciting news for Genesis format, and I want to talk about it a little bit. I want to tell you what it's about and maybe what some of the implications are for the future of the format. As someone who is a fan of Genesis format, I do think this is big news, so let us talk about it. The thing that was announced is essentially that Genesis format is coming to the OCG. It is coming to Japan. This is, of course, something that, in case you didn't know, there's two versions of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game, or even more now, but the main two ones are the TCG, which is what we play over here, and then the OCG, which is what they play in Japan and other Asian countries. They didn't have Genesis format. It was a TCG exclusive thing that Konami NA, Konami Europe, I don't know who exactly, but Konami TCG came up with it. And so we were playing this format in the TCG and the OCG didn't have it. And a lot of OCG players have been asking for it. At least from some of the people that I know, I've been told that, you know, OCG players were looking at Genesis format stuff, Genesis format content, and they really wanted it. And now they have it. So this was announced on Twitter. Yu-Gi-Oh! OCG has posted that Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis is going to have a so-called public release. I don't know how accurate the translation here is. And they're just explaining the rules for Genesis format, which is your standard explanation for the rules that we got when they announced it in the TCG as well. Mostly the people watching this channel are going to be TCG players. I want to talk a little bit about why that even matters for us. The first thing is that I feel like if Genesis becomes a global format, a global phenomenon, then this could have some implications for the future of the game. Stuff like Master Duel integration for Genesis format or a potential world championship on the horizon. People keep asking me on stream, like, hey, do you think the format is going to eventually be in Master Duel or eventually have a world championship? And I always said, like, this is not going to happen until the OCG has the format, because they wouldn't make a world championship for something that only half of the formats basically in the world play. This is a step closer to that. Now, does this mean that they are definitely going to make a world championship for it? No, doesn't mean that. It is just a required step that they would have to take if they ever wanted to have a world championship. And I'm pretty sure that even Konami themselves probably don't know yet where this is exactly going to go, because this is, I think, 100% dependent on how well received it is in the OCG as well as the TCG still. You know, Genesis is still a relatively new thing, even in TCG territories. We've had it for like a couple of months now, but it is still way too early to say, like, if this is going to be an established format that people are going to play and enjoy for years to come, and then maybe we'll get a world championship for it eventually, or if, you know, interest in it is not going to persist and then eventually it's going to fade away. It's all possible, but I do think this is an important step in a direction for the format to be acknowledged by the OCG as well. You know, this shows that there is interest in the OCG, Konami, in what's happening over here, and they are interested in bringing the format over to the OCG. And then if OCG players like it, that I think can indicate more support for Genesis format in the future, just like, you know, potentially, this is dreaming big, but stuff like Genesis format in Master Duel or an eventual world championship is something that I feel like could happen with this. You know, it is speculation, but it is possible. So those are some of the implications on why I think this could be huge for Genesis format. Here's to some other things, because of course the OCG is working with a different card pool than the TCG. They have releases usually before us. You know, a lot of the cards are out in the OCG before they are out for us. At the same time, sometimes there is TCG exclusive archetypes, like for example Mitsurugi, which we got months before the OCG actually got them, which begs the question of like, okay, how is this format going to be handled from now on the OCG side / TCG side? Because there are differences in the card pool and you can't just ignore them, because if you just bring the TCG point list over to the OCG, well, all of the cards from, for example, Blazing Dominion, which is the next core set that's already out in the OCG, all of those cards are at 0 points because the TCG is making the list and we don't have those cards in the TCG yet. So the format would be very imbalanced if they had it that way in the OCG. So for now, it seems like, at least on YG Organization here, it's saying Neuron shows that any cards not available in the TCG are forbidden, such as the Vanilla Black Luster Soldier, Gaga Magician, Gaga Magic, or X Saber Bruno. I think this would also apply to everything in Blazing Dominion for the time being. So if this info is correct, this means that at the moment they are just playing a version of TCG Genesis format in the OCG. This is something that I could see them change in the future, because it was the same way with regular Advanced Constructed format. Actually, this is a story from way back in the day, but there was a time where the TCG and OCG used the same Forbidden and Limited list between their formats, even though the OCG was a couple of months ahead in their set releases, which ended up making it really awkward for the TCG, because very often cards were already hit. It was just weird back in the day. And then eventually, I don't know exactly when, but around, like, I want to say maybe 2012-ish, they decided to have separate ban lists between the OCG and the TCG, which I think is a great decision. I mean, should they have global releases is, I guess, a whole topic and question for its own video. But if you're going to have different release schedules between the two formats, then I feel like you also do need a different ban list. So this is going to be the question. If Genesis format is successful in the OCG, are they eventually going to take over and create their own points list for Genesis format? And then once again, the format is going to drift away, like similar how it is between TCG and OCG Advanced Constructed. TCG Genesis and OCG Genesis are going to be two different formats, which I think is always a little bit sad that we can't play the same exact format and communicate over like the same format. But at the same time, it does make sense if the releases are separate. So it's something that remains to be seen. One thing that I don't personally want is for the OCG to just take over the points list for everybody and just make the points, simply because this is a personal subjective opinion of mine, but I do prefer the TCG philosophy behind the Forbidden and Limited list. I do think a lot of the decisions that they've made in the TCG in recent years and in general are just very healthy for the game. Stuff like banning Max C, but it doesn't stop there. Like, there's so many cards that are legal in the OCG that I think have no business being legal. You know, Harpy's Featherstorm, Dimensional Barrier, powerful extra deck monsters like Baron the Fleur, Warlord Savage Dragon. Like, the TCG has done a lot to tone down the power level of Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit, whereas the OCG just doesn't seem to really care that much about that. They just want everything to be powerful, so everyone feels powerful when they play their pet decks. But in general, I've just been vibing with the TCG ban lists more. So I'm happy that at the moment TCG has control over Genesis as well. Not because they're necessarily better, but they're just different philosophies, and they align more with what I prefer in terms of balancing. So it would be interesting to see what the OCG would do if they had control over the points. But for now, I think I'm happy with what Genesis format is at the moment, and I wouldn't want it to be more broken, which is kind of like what the OCG is, like more powerful than TCG in terms of the power level, and I think that's not what Genesis needs personally. So I'm hoping it stays in the TCG hands, or they make a separate points list, not have the OCG decide globally on what's on the Genesis points list. But yeah, those are just some of the things that were on my mind. You know, what happens to the card pool because we have separate releases, but then also some exciting stuff for the future, like potential World Championships and Master Duel integration. In general, with some of the recent changes that have happened, or some of the announcement that they've made for Genesis format, it has me feeling really excited to play Genesis, because the format itself is something I'm a fan of, but something that is, in my opinion, even more important than the format itself is the logistics around it. You know, like, where can you play Genesis format? How often can you participate? What is the pricing like? You know, how much do they push it? And some of the announcements, just to summarize, that they've made recently are: Genesis format is going to get YCSs with the same pricing as regular YCSs, which is important. That acknowledges the format as a whole, and it's going to give people a real incentive to play the format. Not only that, but they've also announced that they are going to be happening at the same weekend in the same location as regular YCSs, which is going to give people the chance who are traveling to a YCS anyways to participate in both Genesis and Advanced Constructed. And the reason why they can play both is, and that was my favorite announcement in the recent blog post, Genesis events are going to have day 1 on Friday of the YCS. Then on Saturday, you're going to play day 1 of the Advanced Constructed tournament, which would previously just be considered the main event for the YCS. And then on Sunday, you have both day 2s happening at the same time. This means that you can go to a YCS, you can play Genesis on Friday, qualify for Sunday already, you can still play the main event on Saturday, and if you qualify for both day 2s, you can pick and choose whichever one you want, but if you only make day 2 in one of them, you just play that one. And that means basically you can use Genesis as like a secondary chance at becoming a YCS champion, right? Like you can just play it on Friday, and if you qualify for Sunday, you have that one in the bag already. Even if the main event on Saturday goes wrong and doesn't go your way, and you don't make day 2, you've got Genesis, you know, as your plan B. It can even be your plan A if you prefer the format. But if you go there on Friday, let's say you care about Genesis a lot, you go there on Friday and you don't do so well, you don't make day 2, well, you can still play the YCS on Saturday, right? And then that can be your plan B, right? And so in general, more options is always good for me. And I think that was one massive announcement for Genesis format, is that you don't have to decide between the two. You can actually play both. You can play Advanced Constructed and you can play Genesis. And that's the most important thing. And now we get these news as well, which is saying like, okay, the OCG is also now adapting the format as well. And I just think that's exciting. You know, I'm excited for what the future holds for Genesis format. The very first time we're going to have a YCS for Genesis format in Europe is going to be really exciting for me. Of course, we had the Proto YCS at YCS Dortmund, but there they exactly didn't do what I just talked about. It was happening at the same time. Both were on Saturday. So I played the Advanced Constructed main event and I couldn't play Genesis. You were forced to decide. And in the future, you're not going to be forced to decide. So I'm really looking forward to the first YCS where you can play the Genesis YCS main event day 1 on Friday. That's going to be exciting. I'm excited to see what the future holds. Let me know your thoughts on this update and on Genesis as a whole. You know, would you like to see more Genesis content in the future? I've been making some Genesis content and some of it has done pretty well. Some of it hasn't. So I'm just wondering where the community as a whole stands on the format. Are you playing the format right now? Are you enjoying it? Would you like to see content on it? And so on and so forth. Let me know your thoughts on everything in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time, duelists. Bye-bye.